Either be fired or accept a massive pay cut? Okay, I'll take the firing. Posted by Niclo2K. I worked for company for 14 years. I loved working there for 12 of those years. Now, there were two main parts to the job. The first part was the sales sides of things. This was away from the office in the customer's location. This involved quite a bit of driving and, on a couple of occasions, flying abroad to work face-to-face with the customers to deliver a high-quality product. We weren't the cheapest, but we were the superior product, and I was the best employee when it came to delivering the product. I consistently got rave reviews from customers for my personal style when it came to delivering the product and executing the customer's vision. I got a huge amount of repeat business, and I got a lot of new business through word of mouth with customers recommending the company based on their experiences with me. The second part was the office side. This was my weaker side. I hated cold calling potential customers with numbers I found in the phone book. When it came to answering the phone and speaking to potential customers who initiated contact with us, I was fine, but I wasn't great at making the calls. This was my only real not great part of the job. So, in the office, I wasn't asked to make any calls. Instead, I prepared product. I designed new product. I trained new staff members and ended up being one of the biggest parts of my job. I was also the problem solver, helping out whenever and wherever, filling in for sick employees whenever I could. I liked the owner and I liked the manager. I liked all the staff who were around me. All in all, it was a great job that I was really good at and took pride in. The company had been doing so well that the owner had slowly expanded over the 12 years since I started working for company. I joined about 3 months after he'd started, so I'd been part of this expansion. I worked out of my nearest office, but often traveled to other areas to train their staff. I was loaned out, as it were, to other companies to help train their staff. At one point, I was a guest lecturer at a university teaching medical students how to deliver complicated explanations to people who don't have the base knowledge that you yourself do. After 12 years, I was on a decent salary. Not massive, but I was happy. Then the owner decided to sell off part of the company. He was selling the area where my local office was. He told me that he would love for me to remain as his employee, but I would need to work from a different office. This was either require me to move or to quadruple at a minimum my daily commute. The other option was to remain working from my current office but with a new boss. I chose the second option. Before the new owner bought the company, she worked alongside the staff for a couple of weeks to see how we operated. This was before any of us knew she was about to buy the company. As far as we knew, she was just another employee and she was shadowing us to learn. She came with me on assignments in the field and saw my abilities. When the sale was announced and we were informed that she was the new owner, everyone was very surprised. She made some sweeping staffing changes. The manager left to start her own business since the new owner was also going to be the manager. A lot of staff were let go. The secretary, myself, and a couple of newer hires were kept on. The new hires were on the lowest wages, not salaries. Anyone who had gotten to a decent level was let go. Since almost everyone was on a 0 hours contract, she was able to do this. While technically it was a new company for the customers, it was the same old business. The company still had the same trading name. The only difference was that there was a new owner and the registered business name was now different. As far as the customers were concerned, nothing had changed. My job for the first few months after the sale was to train up the remaining staff to replace the more experienced staff members who had been let go. I recommended a couple of new hires who I had experience with working in the past. I was open and honest with the owner and let her know that one of them was a close friend and one of them was my girlfriend. Both were more than qualified for the work and both were happy to join. My friend had recently come back to the country after a year of traveling, while my girlfriend could only work during school holidays. She worked in a school. The owner gave them both interviews and then hired them since we needed the staff. Over the next 2 years, business started to fall. The reason was simple. The new owner decided to try and maximize profits by increasing prices while decreasing the quality of the product. For new customers, this wasn't noticeable. They just thought we were expensive and the product wasn't the best. But for old customers who had been with us for 10 plus years, they immediately noticed. They were being charged more and were receiving less or worse quality. So the owner doubled down and increased prices again. 95% of our old customers left us. New customers almost never became repeat customers. Complaints skyrocketed. While all this was going on, our staff turnover rate was ridiculous. People left after a few months when they realized that the minimum wage they were being paid wasn't worth it. Under the old owner, the average hourly wage for new employees was around 2.5 times the minimum wage. This made people care about their jobs and want to keep them. My girlfriend quit. My friend remained but was looking for something new. Then I got a phone call. The owner needed me to come to the office. This was unexpected. I had just finished working on location with a customer. My next customer was in 2.5 hours, and it was about a half an hour drive away. The office was about an hour and 10 minutes away from both locations. If I drove back to the office, I would have about 5 minutes in the office before leaving. My mileage was paid above my regular salary, so I was saving the company money by doing this. Also, parking was a nightmare around the second location, so I intended to get there as early as possible to find parking and then read a book. The manager didn't care. She needed me to return to the office, so I did. I arrived back to be handed a letter by the owner. It was informing me of a disciplinary meeting to take place in a couple of days' time. I could bring a witness along if I so desired. This knocked me for 6. I was the best employee. I read through her list of complaints about my performance and started working on my defense. At the meeting, I declined to have a witness. Instead, I decided to record the audio of the entire meeting on my phone without informing her. Where I live, this is legal and I didn't need consent. The boss's witness was her friend who she'd met at yoga and hired for an office role, firing the secretary who had been there long before the takeover. Every point that she raised, I could counter. They ranged from the week. You are unavailable to work for a week in August. Yes, I booked a week's holiday so I could attend my cousin's wedding on the other side of the country and turn it into a holiday. To the pathetic. You were late for work on the 12th of May. Is that the day my car broke down and I called the office to let you know? I don't know. I do. Here's the receipt from the garage dated May 12th. To the downright lies. This one I can't write as a quote. Basically, she accused me of gross misconduct for breaking health and safety laws in the way that I was delivering a product for a customer. I hadn't broken health and safety laws. I knew exactly what I was doing since, as I mentioned already, I'd been doing this for 14 years at this point. She had witnessed me do this on multiple occasions and had never mentioned it before because it wasn't an issue. She even had me train staff in this specific delivery method because it wasn't an issue. She finished her list by telling me that she doesn't want to lose me, but she can't justify keeping such a poor employee at my current salary. I had 2 choices. I could either sign a 0 hours contract and work for minimum wage, or she could fire me with 2 weeks' notice. I countered that she would have to give me 12 weeks' notice since my contract guaranteed me 1 week's notice for every year of employment, up to a maximum of 12. She argued that I had only been her employee for 2 years, since before then I worked for the previous owner. I informed her that, with how the business takeover had run, it counts as a continuous employment. I quoted the exact law and code that backed me up. She asked for a 30-minute break in the meeting to let me think about her offer. She went to call her lawyer. When she came back, she informed me that since she was firing me for gross misconduct, she didn't even have to give me any notice at all. If I wanted to remain and move to the 0 hours contract, I could do that today. but if I didn't, then she would have to fire me. But because she was nice, she would give me the 2 weeks notice. I asked for a couple of hours to go home and think about this, and she allowed this. I knew the reason she wanted me to remain for at least the 2 weeks was because one of our few remaining bigger customers were set to have a product delivery from me in that time. They would only work with me. The owner had tried sending other staff in my place on several occasions, and each time there had been problems. It wasn't the staff's fault, it was just a very difficult delivery for a very specific customer which needed to be perfect. As a result, this customer would only deal with me. I called the office and spoke to the owner. I declined the offer of a 0 hours contract and said that I would be leaving. She then said that she was giving me my 2 weeks notice, and I declined her offer of 2 weeks notice. I informed her that if I was being fired for gross misconduct, then surely I cannot be relied upon to safely deliver the product. Therefore, it would be best for everyone involved if I didn't return to work. She panicked and said that she needed me for those 2 weeks. I feigned ignorance and let her know that I was just thinking about what's best for the company. After all, you can't have unsafe staff delivering your product to customers. However, if she wanted to rethink the gross misconduct accusation, then I would work my 12 weeks notice. They were her options, 0 weeks or 12. She chose 12. For those 12 weeks, I worked the same way I had for 14 years. I didn't coast. I didn't slack. I didn't badmouth the company on my way out. I continued to train new staff. I continued to deliver the product in my own personal, exceptional way. I also got in touch with a lawyer who was a specialist in employment law. For those 12 weeks, the owner barely spoke to me. She resented the fact that I knew my legal rights and didn't just believe in her lies. She hated the fact that I could defend myself. She was petty. She accidentally dropped my mug in the kitchen, breaking it. Most petty of all, she paid for every member of staff in the office to have a spa day, except me. I was asked to work my day off to answer the phones while everyone else was being pampered. Nobody knew I hadn't been invited until they arrived at the spa and I wasn't there. Here's the thing. I'm a big fat bearded guy. I have no interest in a spa day. If she'd offered it to me, I would have thanked her and declined the kind offer. But by pointedly excluding me, she was making herself look terrible. For the last 2 weeks, I was training up my friend to basically take over from me. At the end of the 12 weeks, my final day came around. The owner had nothing planned, not so much as a card after 14 years with 2 for her. The office assistant manager, who'd become a friend, had got me some presents, but had to give them to me once the boss was gone for fear of reprisals. The day after my final day, 2 things happened. The first was my friend who I'd been training up to replace me quit. He was on a 0 hours contract, so he required no notice. He was unhappy with her treatment of me and was unhappy that she expected him to do my previously salaried job for minimum wage. He hadn't informed me of his plans to leave, and I only learned of it when he knocked on my door in the middle of the day when he should have been at work to let me know. The second was the owner received a letter informing her that I was bringing legal proceedings against her for unfair dismissal. I had arranged this with my lawyer to be delivered the day after my final day. According to the office assistant, she went pale and started crying before leaving the office to call her lawyer. She refuted my claims for unfair dismissal and said it was gross misconduct, tried to come up with some more reasons for firing me. But the truth was that the company was making less money because of her business practices, and I was the highest and only salary. I had evidence that I was a great employee. I had evidence that she asked me to move to a 0 hours contract. She initially tried to deny this, since the gross misconduct fabrication makes no sense if she wanted me to stay. But once my lawyer provided hers with a transcript of the entire meeting along with a copy of the recording, she knew she was screwed. Still, she let the case drag on for over a year. I think she hoped that the legal fees would lead me to dropping the case. Little did she know my lawyer was working on a no-win, no-fee basis, while hers wasn't, and she ended up settling out of court. The aftermath. The office assistant who had become a friend quit a couple of months after I left. She hated how I was treated and didn't feel safe working for such an untrustworthy boss. Several former customers contacted me personally to inquire why I was no longer with the company. Apparently, the owner was telling them that I just quit. I informed them that I had been fired for cost-cutting reasons. They moved their business elsewhere. Several offered me jobs. One went as far as to offer me a part-time job and to pay for me to attend college to earn a degree required for them to hire me full-time. This was a lovely offer, but they were one of the customers who were a bit too far away to commute, and I wasn't ready to move. In the end, I found a new job in a different industry where a lot of my skills transferred over, currently earning more than I was, working less hours, and for better owners. The business is floundering. COVID left the new owner desperate for cash. She canceled orders but refused to refund customers' money, citing an act of God clause in the contracts. The business's Facebook and Google reviews have tanked. Most staff left. The business is still afloat, but barely. OP, you're such a great worker, and your work was not being respected. New boss comes in thinking they run the place. Oh, we're going to cut costs and do this left and right, blah, blah, blah. You've been there for like 12, 14 years, and they aren't going to honor that. And then they realize, oh, okay, well, we'll just axe you. Well, your customers that really only want to work with you, they need you, and you are needed by the company. They finally find that out after they scammy, shady try to get rid of you with a bunch of crap. And then it's like, oh, maybe this was a terrible idea. Let's bring it back. Oh no, he's onto our scheme. He's going to get us. Oh, the lawyers, everything just piling down on the boss. And eventually they realize what a mistake they made. And now they are completely, utterly, and totally screwed over. And you are on the top, winning, just ahead of where you even were before. And their business, Facebook, Google pages and all, is left in shambles. Nice job, OP. Angry director gets her comeuppance in 4 gradual actions, posted by FML It's SML. Several years ago, I used to work at an agency that hired us out as short-term temporary workers and contractors. These jobs pretty much consisted of stuff that company employees couldn't be bothered to do, and so they got someone in to sort it out. It wasn't great, but I had to make ends meet. Anyway, one of these jobs was for 150 hours at 5 weeks of office administration. There wasn't much more information to go on, but a job's a job. The office turned out to be quite a small, stuffy little building at the back of an industrial estate. I was told to report to Beryl. When I turned up, I was met by a rather grumpy-looking old lady having a cigarette by the front door. This was Beryl. Beryl didn't even say hello or ask me my name, but showed me in, pointed at an enormous pile of boxes full of paperwork, saying, "This all needs to be scanned in. There are 2 scanners connected to a computer there. Off you go. Let someone know if you need some help though, okay?" So off I went. That pile of boxes was to be my job for the next month and a bit. Joy. The office was predominantly young men, with Beryl being the only other woman. She was in her 50s and spent more time smoking than working, and, without being rude, clearly didn't look after herself. It was quite flattering to have a bunch of these guys pop by my workstation for a chat occasionally. After a few days of scanning, Beryl visited my cubicle. She wasn't happy that I spent too much time talking and not enough time working. I was confused. While I didn't have any metrics or targets, I was pretty consistently working through this mountain of paperwork. I got the impression that Beryl didn't like the attention that I was getting. I pointed out to her that I haven't left my desk apart from to go to the toilet. If someone's over here to talk to me, then that's fine, as I can talk and scan at the same time. Well, like I'm doing right now. She wasn't happy and turned away, calling out, "Just do your job," as she left. Some of the other guys had heard this, and they popped by my desk later and said not to worry. They'd had agency staff before, and Beryl always hated it if a young woman arrived because she was grumpy and jealous. Not my words. In fact, a few years ago, one young woman had left the office in tears because Beryl had tore her new one for going to lunch with some of the other guys. Naturally, this annoyed me, particularly because Beryl thought she could bully and disrespect agency staff, and I certainly wasn't going to leave this job because of an angry witch. Malicious compliance number 1. For the rest of my time there, I made sure to get dressed up, makeup and curls, a mini office dress, stiletto heels, and when Beryl saw me clicking my way down the office the next day, fully dressed up just to scan some paperwork, she scowled at me, but she didn't say anything. The next week, Beryl took some time out of her busy smoking schedule to visit me in my cubicle, the second time she'd done so since I'd started. Some of the paperwork I was scanning in had been stapled together, so I'd asked someone in the office for a staple remover and a stapler. I used to pull out the staple, scan the document, rename it on the computer, and then restaple it and put it back in the box. I was just pulling a staple out when Beryl walked by. Beryl's first words to me were, "What are you doing?" I replied that this document was stapled, and if I put it in the machine, well, it'd jam. She raised her voice slightly and said, "Nobody told you to do that. Just scan each page in separately. Leave the papers alone." I could almost hear her eye roll as she walked away. Malicious compliance number 2. So, I did. I scanned everything with staples just folded over and then created folders called Document 123, and each scan went in as 123-page1.pdf, 123-page2.pdf. You get the idea. This slowed me down a lot, but hey, it was what I was asked to do. At some point, Beryl walked by and saw me flipping pages like that. I'd put my hair in a bun and taken my heels off, and she smirked. She thought she'd flustered me and that I didn't see her reaction. Don't worry, Beryl, you didn't, and I did. The paperwork I was scanning in was boxed up as newest first, so as I got to some of the older papers, these had been moved around, a couple of times, and they were slightly scrunched up or folded or similar. A jammed scanner wasn't an issue. It had happened a handful of times before, but as I got to the older papers, the jams became more frequent. It was easy to sort though, just open the back door of the scanner, roll the paper out, cancel the job, and, just redo it. At this point, I'd gone back to unstapling and restapling because Beryl had given me some space, thinking that she'd broken me, and I just wanted to get the job done so I could leave. Beryl walked in one day. This would have been my 4th week there. She saw me unjamming the scanner and she flipped her top. She yelled, "SML, what are you doing?" At this point, all heads in the office turned to where we were. I calmly told her, "Well, the scanner's jammed. I'm just pulling the paper out so I can rescan it. It shouldn't take me more than just a few minutes." She continued yelling, "At no point were you instructed to perform IT repairs. We have someone for that. Just stop what you're doing and get someone to help you. I asked you this when you started. Why can't you follow simple instructions?" It took a lot of patience not to argue back with her, which I thought was what she wanted. But I just said, "Okay, fine. Can I speak to the IT guy just to sort this out?" I couldn't have choreographed her response better. I then knew that she did want me to argue so she could kick me out, because she hesitated and said, well, the IT guy is off for the rest of the week." This was on a Thursday. "Use the other scanner. If you jam it, let me know." And she just stormed off. Malicious compliance number 3. I knew her diary, and she was off the next day, which was Friday. I carried on with the one scanner, making sure it didn't jam that day, and waited until the next morning. Coincidentally, the scanner jammed on the first piece of paper that I fed into it. Who would have thought? She didn't answer her phone, and as she wasn't in the office, I spent the day and just sat around without much to do. While talking to the guys in the office, I learned that the company had been bought out by a much larger IT firm, and they just wanted the rights to the proprietary software that they developed. It also turned out that the CEO of the small company basically paid himself into retirement and appointed Beryl as the new director. Beryl knew that her days were numbered, so she was even more bitter to the staff. The guys working there had been committed to various levels of careers within the new IT firm, which they were happy with. As I was told, 120,000 employees, 30 dev roles are easy to find, one director role is not. Anyway, when we returned on Monday, you could almost see the vein in her neck throbbing. she'd wasted an entire day of whatever her company paid my agency because little old me wasn't trusted to fix a paper jam. I used to get in a little later than the rest of the staff, agency perks, woohoo! But when I got in, she'd had the IT champion perform the skilled job of opening a scanner and pulling a piece of paper out. She didn't even look at me when she said, "Scanners are fixed, get on with your job and don't mess around." At this point, you may be thinking, "Oh, SML, this is a lot of text for some pretty trivial malicious compliance." Well, you'll like the final part. My last week there coincided with a new contract that the company had been given by their new owners. I assume it was some sort of litmus test. While I don't pretend to understand what it was, the job involved a lot of scanning documents that had been handwritten. Hooray, more boxes! At the same time, a few of the guys who worked there were going on a visit to the new parent company, which were based in the USA and I live in the UK. The IT champion was one of those guys who went. When the boxes were delivered to my cubicle, Beryl popped by and said, "These take priority. All of what I said to you is more important than ever. Do not mess around, otherwise you are out of the door. Am I clear?" Yes, ma'am. The paperwork delivered was from the USA. Our paper sizes are different. The first piece of paper I fed into the scanner jammed it. A safety lock because it expected A4 and got US letter instead. I jammed both scanners. Beryl, not being one to turn down a free trip to America, had gone with them. I rang her at 11 a.m. UK time, which was 5 a.m. their time. She picked up and was not impressed. I felt sorry for the folks adjacent to her hotel room when she screamed down the phone, "You've done what? How? Why?" I tell her about the USA paperwork, and she shouts, "Can you not fix it?" Final malicious compliance. No, you've told me many times that I can't fix these machines. What's the business continuity plan? Now, as a side note, my brother told me that phrase and he still doesn't quite understand why I turned up to his house a bit later with a few pizzas and a box of beer. Beryl had no idea what to do. She was clearly flustered. Can you just do what you can? We need this done." What would you want me to do? Can you fix the scanners because this is really important? I'm sorry, you told me that I can't do that. I need simple instructions to work with. Just fix it. I'd be happy to show an IT specialist where the scanners are if you can get them here to She hung up on me. Well, that's that then. I spent the rest of my week chatting to my colleagues, updating my CV, and applying for jobs. Nobody turned up to fix the scanners. When my final week finished, I said bye to the guys I'd worked with. I wished them luck, and I left with none of the critical paperwork scanned in. When Beryl got back from her business trip, I learned that she'd spent one day at the parent company and left it to the other guys. When the crap hit the fan because nothing was being delivered, they wondered where she was. This was day 2 into the 5-day business trip. She was at a spa. Phone switched off. She flew out early on day 5 without seeing any of her colleagues or the parent company. I kept in touch with a few of the guys afterwards. After this, the dev guys were transferred contracts to the larger IT firm. They all got a very small salary increase, but were also able to work from home. This was pre-COVID, so it was a bit of a rarity back then. Beryl, meanwhile, Beryl didn't fare so well. She was initially offered redundancy, which is paid, including pension deals, but when someone complained that she'd not been present for the meetings, which I think was their IT champion, they found out that she'd been sightseeing and shopping and tanning and getting her hair done on company time. She ended up being fired. No bonus, no pension, nothing. I quit the agency not long afterwards, and after 1 or 2 moves, ended up in a job that I'm very happy with. The agency were none the wiser about any of this. They just wanted their money, and aside from one initial checkup call, they left me to it. Oh, gotta clap for OP on this one because I love this when stories just start off as malicious compliance. You got a terrible boss, you do what they say, not what they want you to do, and then it just escalates. And as you continue in the story, your mind is like, oh, where's this going? The anticipation, the suspense is building, and you just know something's going to happen. You don't know what, you don't know when, but by the end of this story, something's going to be wrecked, like this Karen of a boss. This goes pro, this goes nuclear. OP, you set all of the traps, the dominoes fell, and you knew exactly what you wanted to do, how to reach it, and what to make this happen. On top of barrels and competence, you got a perfect plan. You nailed it. Way to go, OP. Sit and look pretty instead of doing actual work? Okay, posted by DC 1920. For the sake of clarity, I'm going to say that I work in an industry which is similar to warehousing. Same logic in the grand scheme of things. In my branch and several surrounding branches, there are only 2 staff members to keep the place running, so we all have casual uniforms. Just a polo shirt and appropriate pants and footwear. I mainly do administration work and have a team member who works in the back end of things, but I'm capable and willing to jump outside when required of me. Examples of me needing to do work in the back would be if we have a huge rush, or if I need to send my teammate to help at another branch, or out on the road to collect stock and I have to fill in for him while he's gone. It's a pretty good setup because working outside really breaks up the monotony of being stuck at a desk all day, and it's easy enough to do both parts of the job when I need to. Some genius in head office decided he wanted to change the uniform for any and all admin staff to something a little more corporate and dressy. I can only describe this uniform as a 3-piece suit made with the heaviest fabrics known to man. Suddenly, I've gone from wearing a polo shirt, which is comfortable, to wearing a white long-sleeve business shirt with a vest, jacket, and neckerchief, complete with a skirt, stockings, and a slight heel. I straight up look like a flight attendant working in an industrial warehouse, and I can barely lift my arms high enough to hold my steering wheel on the drive to work. It was a poorly designed uniform, and I was so incredibly uncomfortable wearing it. I was very quick to voice my anger. I first mentioned how it's unfair, borderline cruel, to expect staff to wear such a thick and layered uniform when we live in Australia, particularly in a place known for our consistent high temperatures and harsh sun. I then asked how I would be expected to leave the desk to operate machinery and to do heavy lifting in a suit, skirt, and heels. I was met with the promise that anyone working in admin and wearing a corporate uniform would not have to leave their desk to do any back-end work at all. I raised another concern, stating that we did not have enough staff for them to make this particular promise and still maintain our quality of work and hit our deadlines, and I was met with a strong guarantee that I would not have to do any physical work in my day-to-day operations. I was all but ordered to sit at the desk to look appealing for clients and never move from there. Okay then, no problem. From that point onwards, I followed their instructions. I never left my desk. There would suddenly be long wait times for orders and fulfillments because my team member was on the road on a job and there was no one on site to continue his work until he got back. If my team member called in sick, I would spend the day pushing back deadlines with clients, which affected our targets and our reputation. Funnily enough, my teammate only started getting sick because I had to have the office air conditioner on freezing temperatures so I wouldn't get heat stroke at my desk. I was honest with clients who had complaints and explained that I would usually step in to help make sure that their needs were met, but was specifically instructed not to anymore, and then redirected their complaints through to customer service in head office. After a few months of this, I was invited to a meeting with 3 of my direct managers and an HR representative. They were clearly upset about the drop in productivity and amount of the complaints we were receiving. I let them all say their piece before reminding them I raised these concerns to them months ago and was merely following instruction given to me, which was abundantly clear that I was to take care of admin work at my desk and do nothing else. I let them know that my hands were tied, so all I could do was look pretty and placate clients when we inevitably couldn't meet their needs as promised. I suggested hiring more warehousing staff to fill in the gaps left by admin staff who were now chained to their desk by uniform and unable to ease the pressure of the workload like we used to do. I could see that comment definitely hit them right where I wanted it to, and they couldn't argue with me for following their instructions, so I was told they would get back to me on a solution moving forward. Well, here I am at work 2 weeks later, typing this post while wearing my old polo shirt uniform. I was fully prepared to find another job if their solution wasn't reasonable, and maybe I still will look to leave this place, but I'll take the win for now. The sheer incompetence of this boss situation here. You have someone who's going above and beyond, helping you out in ways that you may not even realize, and then you put these just silly restrictions on them that they have to do this uniform that's over the top, and oh, you have to stay at your desk. You're not allowed to go anywhere else. Oh, so I just get to sit and look pretty to look nice to the clients, huh? Is that how it's going to be? Well, now all the work's going to fall behind. Now you're not going to have enough people to do the extra stuff that we probably shouldn't even be doing in the first place because you have me chained to my desk with a stupid uniform so I can look pretty. Really? And then it all starts to come down on them, and OP was right in the first place, right all along, as it is, and now they're like, oh, maybe we messed up. Let's go ahead and back this up. And on top of all of this, they almost lost a gold 5-star employee over a silly, stinking uniform. Wow, you know what? I can't believe it. Actually, I can believe it because this is true malicious compliance. OP, you nailed it. You want me to stay in my lane? You got it, boss. Posted by Original Tank 5357. Some time ago, I used to work in a medical specialty office. It was ID or infectious disease as a medical assistant. Sidebar, I used to work in the food industry and was always told that I wouldn't ever contribute to society or do anything meaningful with my life. While I absolutely loved working as a chef and a baker at the time, I wanted to do more with my life, and I wanted to prove to myself that I'm not as useless as people made me out to be. Not that I believe that for 1 second, but in my culture, if you aren't a businessman or a doctor, you're lower than everyone else. It's pretty terrible, but that's how the culture is. I now live in the US, and it's been pretty good. Back to the story. I had graduated top 3 in my class and was certified through the AAMA and scored in the 90th percentile, so I knew my stuff. But I've never worked a white-collar job in my life, so I was afraid that I would seem, well, out of place. I did my externship at this ID clinic in my town, and they loved my interpersonal skills. They loved my work and stated that I would be offered a job at the end of my externship. I was elated. I was just so happy to have a job secured and to have a foot in the door to the medical field. It turns out my blue-collar experience had helped me relate with a lot of our patients, and they appreciated my work more for it. As my time went on, my experience working in the medical field became less about the money and more about the people that I can help with my direct patient care. They weren't just charts, MRNs, medical record number for those non-medical folk, and diagnoses. They were Jeff, who ran the local farmers market, or Meg, who worked with kids at the Y. I cared for my patients, and our repeats would always look forward to coming back to see me and have a chat. I loved working with my patients. So at the end of my externship, I was extended an offer of employment for a decent amount of money. It was more than my other classmates were offered at their practices, but still not a whole lot. And I took it. I was to be the medical assistant in charge of direct patient care. This meant checking in, rooming, dealing with prescriptions, performing and searching for labs, packing wounds, and doing dressing changes. Being officially part of the office now, I was determined to work my butt off and show myself and my colleagues that I could do it. I continued to do my work and care for patients. However, over time, I would notice certain things that weren't in my job duties that I could do that would help care for the patients. Certain things like calling their doctors for updated orders or checking for records from local hospitals. Also, helping patients find good home health or SNFs, which are skilled nursing facilities. It's generally, though, the medical scheduler's job. This also included looking into insurance coverage or billing and checking referral statuses for referral coordinators, among other things. Doing these tasks meant a bit more work on my end, but it also meant the best care that I could offer for my patients. This went on for a year, and my patients were happy and willing to come to appointments. Apparently, not a whole lot of people like to come to a building that has the words infectious diseases in big print on its side. Then one day, out of the blue, I'm called into my supervisor. Young, naive me thought, oh great, they finally see how hard I'm working and I'm finally getting recognized. Maybe they'll promote me to lead. Nope. My boss, Shelly, told me that I'm working too hard and sticking my fingers into too many pots. I asked where this was coming from, and she stated that I was staying more than 5 minutes late too many times, and it's because I'm doing too much work. She said, we can't keep paying you all this overtime. I think I was maybe making 30 minutes of OT at most. She said that's still too much. I'm doing too much work. I was baffled, absolutely stunned. I thought I was doing the practice of service, but she undermined the entirety of the last year's hard work that I put in. I was frustrated and I was a bit upset, but I tried my best to remain professional. So I asked her what she would like me to do, and the next words out of her mouth were ones that she would come to regret. Well, I see you're doing a lot of tasks that are meant for other positions. Maybe you should stop doing those and just stay in your lane. She then proceeded to write me up for trying to abuse the time clock. Insert a Jim Carrey, alrighty then, and cue malicious compliance. I asked her to send me a list of exactly what my job duties are, which she was happy to do. It listed most of what I originally was meant to do, except it didn't include dressing changes and packing wounds. I saw this and immediately knew this would be trouble for my boss. You see, she was the only other medical assistant on our end of the office that was certified to deal with minor wound care and dressings. At that point, since I was the main contact for patients, that would fall onto her plate. So I told each of my patients that I won't be doing any of that extra work because it goes against the practice's wishes, and I was told not to. All of them understood, but it's tough to get patients to keep appointments when things are delayed. Not long after the order was issued, I got my first page for a wound pack. Excellent. One thing to note about my boss is that she absolutely abhors feet. And one thing to note about infectious disease clinics is that we dealt with a lot of diabetic foot infections, at least 2 or 3 a day. Doc wants to see how it's healing, so he removes the wrap and unpacks the foot. Spent a little extra time with the patient and now has to get to his next appointment. I'm paged by the doc to pack the foot, wet to dry. No problem, doc, let me get Shelly for you. He then gives me a kind of odd look, but continues to his next appointment. Shelly gloves up, and as soon as she passes the threshold of the room and notices it's a diabetic foot, she's holding back her gags and immediately sweating. I pass by the room and she asks for my help. As calmly as I could, I turned and said, sorry boss, packing wounds isn't on my list. I can't do it, just staying in my lane. By the way, the 2 o'clock in 3 is a through and through foot infection. Probably should get that packed soon too. I'm glad we were wearing masks because she couldn't see the massive crap-eating grin that I had on my face throughout that whole encounter. She tried to write me up about disobeying superiors, but I'd spoken with my GM and she was behind me. Instead, she ended up getting written up for trying to put wound packs back on my list after she told me I did too much work. She ended up having to do part of the medical scheduler's job, part of the referral coordinator's job, and part of the billing office's job as she let go one of our front desk staff because there was not enough work to go around. There was plenty of work. I was doing it. She didn't last long after that. The burnout got to her and she stepped down from her supervisor position 4 months after that. They ended up hiring another super and I left the practice shortly after that I got the vid. They told me to come back into work after 3 days and still very symptomatic. So I told them I wouldn't endanger my patients like that and to shove it. Last I heard, they have an entirely new front office staff and they're perpetually short-handed. Shoulda let me drive my own path instead of staying in your silly lanes. This is beautiful because OP was above and beyond, like the best employee you could ever ask for. Going just over the moon for these patients that they legitimately care about. They are the kind of doctor that loves their patients and just doesn't do it for the paycheck. And you can't say that about all. I mean, don't you wish, like, I don't know if you have a doctor like that, that is great. But if you don't you wish yours was? And then they get punished for it. And not only punished, the boss who lays down, drop this hammer, is actually completely backfired because they hate feet, and then they just get shoved in to the worst possible foot situation you can. Diabetic foot infections are terrible, and I feel horrible for people that are in that. They need someone who cares about their situation to help them out, and then Shelly is the one they get stuck with. What a shame. But you know what, OP? Even though they told you to come back 3 days after you got the vid, you didn't. Just that is what makes sense. That's what you should do. And yet they still wanted you to do it. You came out on top. You knew what you were doing, delivering that revenge pro-nuclear MC, and you have won. OP, congratulations on that win. Stop bothering us with that deadline. We've got this. Sure thing, kids. Posted by Rare Cheesecake 9701. Some background. I, 27 female, work in IT. I'm a well-respected and known member of the IT party circle where I live, so to speak. I am not jaw-dropping, but people know me and I have a very good reputation. One of the things is that I got to the point in my career when I wanted to give back, so I started mentoring others. Mostly, I mentored adults or those who are closer to me in age. Career advice, how to apply for different exchange programs that can boost their professional growth and improve their speaking and writing skills. The usual. But I always was one up for the challenge, and I decided to try and mentor kids. It's not a secret that IT and STEM are increasingly popular right now, and more people want to get into the field. Therefore, there are myriads of boot camps, hackathons, and mentoring programs for all ages. So I signed up for one such program as a mentor. Teach kids how to code with blocks, tell them what AI is, and how to develop an MVP. It sounds more complicated than it might look at first glance, especially when you're an educated professional with a degree, explaining concepts that are rather complicated to children who may have less than 1/50th of your tech knowledge. I must add that participation in the said program gives kids credits and can help them get into better schools or even be eligible for some university scholarships later in life. So only pros, if you ask me. The only thing is that they must upload their MVP project to the site before the deadline. I was assigned 2 teams. Primary, which is early middle schoolers, Team A, and high schoolers, which is Team B. Both had 5 members, and the youngest in Team A was 8 years old. I thought, oh my goodness, that will be tough, thinking about Team A and how I am up for a tough time. Also, since they are so young, the parents of the kids must observe Team A meetings and my lessons, and parents equals problems. Ironically, despite my worries, even with help from the parents, the kids in Team A were doing great. But the same can't be said about Team B. A little side note, with my mentees, I have 2 rules. 1. At least 1 meeting per week. At least 50% of the group must be present. 2. Communication. When I type something, like task to do or reply to a question asked before, I ask my mentees to respond. Not even text. A thumbs up emoji will also suffice. We all know that red status doesn't mean much when you can accidentally open an app for a second or swipe it to clear RAM on the phone. So, Team A attended all the meetings and responded to my assignments. There was a curriculum provided by a program to follow, and they were very receptive overall. Team B started okay, but then started not showing on meetings and leaving assignments read but unresponded. I understand they have a lot on their plate. Exams are no joke, but they disregarded my time, which I will not be okay with. I have a job to do, and mentoring in that program was 100% volunteering, and there was no payment for the mentors. There was, however, a very strict deadline. The middle of April, when their MVPs must be loaded onto the website for later judgment. I, even when ticked, am a professional first and an angry lady second. So I wrote multiple messages asking for updates on the project, with warnings at the end that deadline is April 15th, don't miss it. After one such message, the so-called leader of Team B, Sam, wrote to me this. Hi OP, I know that you probably mean well, but you only bother the team with those deadline messages. Can't you, chill out? When we need you, we'll contact you and all. Just get off our hair and, let us do our job. I'm sorry if this hurts your feelings. It is what it is, heart. After I read that message, I was like, what the heck? But I did respond that I would stop messaging if that caused tension within the team. Though the deadline is still on the 15th and the site would reject any application that was uploaded after. Just stop, okay? Jeez, said Sam to that, so I decided, okay, I'm washing my hands out of this. Cue malicious compliance. Since that message, I haven't written anything to Team B. I had scheduled no meetings, updates, or checkups about the curriculum and their understanding, and definitely not a written reminder of the deadline once. Deadline came. Team A uploaded their project with no issues, and their parents even bought me a nice box of chocolate as a thank you gesture. Just like the deadline came and went, Team B started bombarding chat, asking me to help because something is wrong with the site. We can't upload our project. I entered the chat and said, yes, it will not upload. No, it's not an issue with the site. The deadline has passed, so if you try to upload, it will only show you an error message. I warned you, kids. No extra credits, no nothing. The rules of that program are simple, but they are hard, no exceptions ones. Team B tried to blame me, saying that as a mentor, it was my job to ensure that they would succeed. And I reminded them that my job as a mentor is to provide support and guidance, keep track of their progress, and to remind them of the deadline, which, all of the above, they, via Sam, asked me not to. And since I respected their boundaries, I did exactly what they had requested. They can sulk as much as they want. I have all our communication in writing, so they don't have a leg to stand on when trying to accuse me of sabotaging them and their program. Tough luck, kids. You know, I was just talking to somebody about this just the other day, and we were talking about how as you go into your teenage years, high school, you begin to think, I know everything, I got this all under control. And as you get older, if you're not there yet, please listen to these words, you realize how little you do actually know. And unfortunately for Team B in the high school age, this was a hard, tough learning experience for them. And I'm not bashing anybody on high school. I was there it's been several years ago now, but it's one of those things. It's like, it's a life experience. You get this, it's hard, it sucks, but you got to learn from it. And now hopefully Team B looking back will be like, hey, this lady, she was just trying to teach us a lesson on malicious compliance and what we can do to keep ourselves straight and in check. OP, I don't know if you realize it, but you just gave them a tough love life lesson. Way to go. Fire me because I did my job? Okay, hope you don't need all of these supplies. Posted by Punk Tyrannosaurus. I love taking photos of people, to the point that I have 2 resumes for applying for jobs, and one of them is specifically for photography work. So I was psyched when I got a job in a photo studio. It was a chain and it wasn't like high quality work, but it was still awesome. I took a lot of photos of very cute babies in particular. Well, the company had a 3-strike policy. Once there were 3 issues with you, you were gone. They made you sign off on every single one of those reports. It didn't matter how much later it was that you got your next strike, they never went away. Okay, it doesn't seem like a great business model, but okay. And being fair, I did get 2 strikes, which were very reasonable. One day, I missed work because I forgot to set an alarm. It was a super irregular schedule, and it wasn't always to keep track of. Mea culpa. The next strike happened because I scheduled a photo shoot for before the beginning of a shift accidentally. The program was supposed to only show you the times that an employee would be available for doing photo shoots, and they changed our hours with very little warning. So the photo shoot that I had scheduled the week before would have been within our hours, but was no longer. I felt super bad for the mom and the daughter who came in early for their photos, and I helped them sort everything out with a free photo redemption in apology. I still got my second strike for that. Now, the last strike. I actually got 2 on the same day. Around Christmas, our store goes nuts. I mean, we have to have twice as many people working in order to keep everything in order. During that, I was training a new employee and helping with her photo shoots and my own, and running cash and taking passport photos and teaching her the rules for them and. It was a nightmare. And what made it worse was that one customer submitted 2 complaints that day about me. See, this customer felt that I was pushing her to buy photos. Literally, all this company cares about is pushing the photo packages, and I was instructed relentlessly to do it more and with more energy because I didn't make enough people feel they had to have them. So, great. I convinced a customer to spend money instead of just giving them free things and not getting $1 from them, like the company was always yelling at me to do. And I got a complaint for that. Great. And then the other complaint was even more ludicrous. The customer felt I was being too bossy with the other photographer. The one that I was training. The one that didn't know how to do the job yet, so I had to tell her how to do things. Apparently, I deserved to be fired for telling her how to do things. I was heartbroken. It's been a few years now, so I've gotten over it, but I was so happy working as a photographer. But here's where the malicious compliance finally kicks in. See, by my nature, I end up doing a lot of work that isn't actually my job because I want to help. I enjoy feeling useful, but they're firing me because they don't want me to sell things or train people like they had told me to do. So for the last 2 weeks of my job, I stopped counting all of the money for deposits. That was the manager's job, even though she hadn't done it in half a year since making me do it. This meant she had to come in on days that she didn't work just to do the deposit. I stopped actively recruiting customers, which is what you're supposed to do in your downtime, cold call previous customers and prowl around the attached mall for people that you can convince to get photos. Now the best tactic was always to find people with new young ones, tell them how beautiful their baby is, offer them a free print of one of their photos after a shoot. Almost no one passes that up because then they have a wonderful photo to hold on to. I didn't feel guilty doing it because it genuinely makes people happy. I stopped taking meticulous notes of every interaction that was worth following up on. I used to make a note for the next shift about how X customer had seemed interested but was unconvinced, and that a simple reminder of the offer would probably be enough to get them to buy. Or I would make a note about someone who forgot their passport photos and whether or not they had paid already. And then, on my last day, the truest malicious compliance happened. They wanted me gone. Okay, so I took my name tag and I packed it away. I went into the photo studio and grabbed the kids' toys that I'd brought in to help get young ones to cooperate. See, babies don't really understand a stranger saying, "Smile for the camera," but if you shake a rattle at them and make silly faces, they're very good at smiling for that. I cleaned up all the things I had laid out neatly for easy preparation, and I put them back in storage. I cleaned up the counters to get rid of all the notes and the passport photos that weren't claimed that day because that was what we were technically supposed to do. And then came the real part that this title refers to. Over my 9 months working there, a number of issues had come up with the things we worked with. For the passport photos, we needed a paper trimmer to slice off the edges quickly and neatly. We had one when I started, and then it broke. I brought in a replacement. It got broken too. Still, we needed one, so I brought in another replacement. We also had gotten our stapler stolen. No worries, I had one at home that we could use. And the keys to the storage, the extra receipt paper, the passport paper, where we keep the deposits, where we keep our paper files. They were tiny. And the color of them was so bland that throughout the course of the day, they would get lost easily 30 times. I had bought a large blue fluffy keychain to attach to it with permission from the boss. Never lost the keys again, not one of us. We also had a sign when I started there which could pop out which said, "I'm in a photo shoot, please be patient, I'll be with you in a moment," or something along those lines. Because there was often only one employee at a time, and they had to do photo shoots and all the passport photo drop-ins. Well, my boss accidentally dumped her coffee on that sign after she tripped one day. So I went out of the way to get a new one printed, bought a plastic sleeve for it, and set it up with a cardboard backing so that it wouldn't break or get ruined. It was better than the old one. So, of course, when I left, I took my sign, my keychains, my paper trimmer, my stapler, my toys, and most notably, my shutter button. See, that camera had a shutter button attached that would allow you to move about while snapping photos. Again, helped with the little ones because they don't understand directions, so you have to be able to physically draw their attention somewhere. This cord had gotten frayed and not replaced. It shocked me nasty enough to leave a burn, so I took it off the camera and brought my own in. I got a call the next day asking me how dare I steal the company's supplies. I calmly replied that I had just taken back the items that belonged to me, and that they could keep the broken paper trimmer that I had brought in. I even left them a pair of scissors that I brought for a backup when the first paper cutter broke. I even brought them a box of paper clips for using since they didn't have a stapler anymore. The store closed down not 2 months later. Crazy how when you fire your hardest worker over things that you told them to do, and one missed shift, mea culpa, other employees are less than enthused about the chance of the same thing happening. And no one else worked nearly as hard to keep everything in the black as I did. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I liked everyone except the manager, since it was only 2 other employees and they did their work well and treated me nicely. They just had a better sense of doing what they were paid for and nothing else. And for reference, the employee who the customer felt I was treating badly looked at our manager like she was insane and asked when I had done that because she knew for a fact that the only time I raised my voice at either herself or the only other employee was because it was too loud for them to hear me otherwise. She apologized to me, said that she was worried it was her fault because she had been a little nervous that day because she was dealing with other things and was worried that the customer had gotten the wrong impression because of that. Said employee then went on to have her own gallery show, leaving shortly after I was fired. Now, people have raised questions about why I worked 2 weeks after being fired. Simply enough, there was no one to cover my shifts. One employee was in China celebrating New Year's with her grandparents. One was working on her own photos, which became her gallery show. And the manager would be very, very over 40 hours if she worked my shifts too. And I needed the money and wanted to say goodbye to some of the kids and parents who I took the photos of every month. It was relatively common. A lot of them wanted photos of their babies as they grew and changed. Though this has reminded me of one sweet thing they told me, so thanks for questioning all. One of the families said they wouldn't be rebooking next month then because no one else has gotten their kid to take such nice photos. It felt awesome. It's been 6 years, so I'd forgotten about that. And just another torturous tidbit about this company, they kept every studio temperature the same as corporate. Corporate was in a very different climate area. It was almost always either meltingly hot all summer or freezing cold in the winter. And it has been brought to my attention repeatedly that a shutter release cord does not have enough power to do that much damage, which leads me to believe that one of the commenters who suggested it may have been an issue with the flash setup in the studio is probably right, that I was just completing the circuit. All I know is that it hurt like a witch and that it stopped happening after the cord was replaced. Now, it seems likely that it just stopped happening because I was then no longer in contact with a good conductor like metal. Now we need to check out some of the comments. Serenity Violet says, "Just crazy. I don't even get the 3 strikes thing. People occasionally make mistakes. I wouldn't give a strike unless it was egregious, and they completely failed to take into account your hard work and dedication. I mean, yeah, like, Typically, strikes fall off like 60-90 days, especially once you show that you're worthy. Father Duncan Center says, I don't understand the strikes never falling off. Are you going to tell me that I could get 2 strikes, have an unblemished record for the next 10 years, and then get fired because I got my 3rd strike for something stupid, like oversleeping and being late one morning? That's beyond asinine. Yeah, well, it is. It's very true. It's what I was just saying a moment ago. Carrie and Comfort says, that kind of place is built to churn through staff. Yeah, and take advantage of young people who didn't know any better, OP replies. Q junior staff having to buy and supply their own office equipment at their own cost, Junk Dumper says, with OP replying, yeah, I don't do that anymore. Yeah, honestly, like, the company's supposed to fund the stuff, not the workers. Like, if you need a new pen or a new paper clip or something, that's the company's responsibility, not your own. If it were your own, it could be like a business write-off or something if you owned your own business, but you don't. That's not your purpose. That's not your job. OP, man, it's just the worst because you got to work at a place with photography like you really wanted to do, and it turns out that they were micromanaging, not taking you appreciatively, taking you for granted, telling you do this, that, and then when it finally comes that you say enough is enough, well, you actually got the strikes, which were crazy. Then it's like, oh, I want to take my supplies back because these are mine and I own them. Oh, wait, the company's freaking out now. What our supplies are, this or that. Well, you didn't take OP for granted, and then the fallout happens. Now the company falls apart, everybody else leaves, the customers don't like it either. All because you let a gold star, 5-star employee go due to those strikes. OP, I do wish you well in the future, and I hope everything is going well now. Great story, way to go. The customer is always right, posted by Hyperquisitist. About 9 years ago, I worked at a food service job within a retail store. This job was absolutely horrible as I got written up for anything and everything that I did. If I took my breaks, write up. If I didn't take any breaks, write up. I got called out once with a doctor's note saying that I absolutely could not work as my illness was highly contagious. Write up. This was my first time ever calling out, and I gave 48 hours notice. The second and last time was for my grandma's funeral, which I had requested off and was denied. I was written up then too. Any excuse my supervisor could find to write me up, he did. Being in high school at this time, I took this very personally and assumed that I had done something wrong. I worked there for 2 years, taking each write-up as a learning opportunity. However, I finally reached a point where I recognized that it wasn't my fault, and the malicious compliance began. In this job, there were add-ons, and these add-ons came with an upcharge. I had customers complain to me constantly about not wanting to be charged extra, but normally they would just pay it and move on. One customer, however, refused to pay for the add-on, but wanted it anyway. I pointed to the sign which said that it would cost extra and tried my best to politely explain to her that I can't give it to her without charging her. She demanded to speak to my manager. I happily called my manager over, as at that time the leader was also my area supervisor. Now each day there was an overall leader which would cycle, but each department had their own supervisor as well. I'll call him Bob. Bob was employed through the retail store specifically. Regardless, I thought that surely Bob would have my back, as he knows the most about the rules that I had to follow. I was very, very wrong. After listening to the customer, Bob proceeded to yell at me in front of her, stating, "The customer is always right, and you are not paid to argue with her. Give her what she wants and do not charge her for any of it." He also informed her that I would be written up for this, and I was. From that moment on, whenever a customer complained about having to pay for an add-on, I didn't charge them for it. If they demanded their items for free, saying they didn't like them or had a bad experience in the past, I gave it to them for free. After all, the customer says that they shouldn't have to pay for it, so who was I to argue? Of course, he meant that I shouldn't argue to the point of the manager being called, but he didn't specify, and I didn't want to be written up for it again, nor did I care to follow a do as I mean, not as I say policy anymore. It didn't take long for the people who worked in the actual retail store to learn that they could also get add-ons for free if they complained about it, as at the time that they were ordering, they were technically customers. Since each add-on cost between 60 cents and $1, and most customers wanted more than one add-on, the company was losing an average of $2 to $3 per transaction on the add-ons alone, not even considering the customers who got their entire order for free. Now, of course, $2 to $3 doesn't seem like much, but it was enough to catch the attention of my district supervisor, who I'll call Ann. Ann was employed by the food service company, and her job was to oversee the branches that were inside retail stores. Ann was very nice and respected the employees who worked with her company, regardless of if they weren't employed directly by her company, as was my case. She first asked Bob about why our location appeared to be less profitable than other locations and less profitable than it had been a few months previously. He tried to pin it on me, saying that I was stealing from the company by giving my friends and coworkers free items. Ann, understanding of how serious of an accusation that was, insisted on speaking with me alone. I expected to be fired, but she instead asked me why profits had gone down. I explained to her what Bob had told me about the customer always being right and how I had gotten written up and didn't want to be written up again, so I followed his instructions word for word. For the first time since starting this job, someone took my side. She agreed that not charging for those add-ons would explain the loss that she was seeing, and that how Bob handled the situation was unprofessional and entirely against policy. Having Bob accuse me of stealing to protect himself was my last straw, and I put in my 2 weeks' notice that same day. HR had apparently taken notice to how Bob was treating me, as her exact words were, "It's about time. I'm glad you're finally standing up for yourself." With my consent, she altered some of the dates to make my end date be a week earlier than it should have been, since the schedule had not been written yet. And to this day, I think of her as my guardian angel. Shortly after my last shift, I was informed by my friends that Bob no longer worked there as well. Ann was so upset with him that she called his supervisor and launched an investigation into his behavior. As it turns out, I was not the only one that he would write up without a legitimate reason. They were also incredibly upset that he directly caused an unnecessary loss in profits. He couldn't blame me for it, as it was his words, and many people corroborated that he had said the same to them at one point or another. I was just the first to maliciously comply with his request, thus bringing his behavior to the attention of someone in a higher position than him. He was fired, effective immediately. Again, it's another malicious compliance that goes pro and nuclear, because, you just walk in, the employee is like, okay, follow the rules, do a little bit of twisty twist here. Oh, that's malicious compliance. Turns out the Bob here was fixing some things up, and it wasn't only OP, it was all these other employees that he was falsely writing up as well. An investigation gets launched into his employment and actions, and he gets axed. And the company loses OP. Like, that I did not expect to have all that come out, and it did. It's wild. What do you think? Was OP right, or was Bob? Corporate wants us to stop doing our job in order to save time, posted by Alinon. I used to work for this company a few years ago. I was part of a team of around 20 people, working on checking tickets to see if they were correctly formed and sent to the right department. If everything was correct, we'd close the ticket with yes and make an appointment with the right department to do a physical visit in order to fix the problem. If something was wrong, however, our role was to guide the person so that they wouldn't make the same mistakes again. We'd close the ticket with no, a short explanation on why it's no and how to fix it. After that, we'd have to send an email to the person themselves and CC every team manager of their location. We had 4 different locations with 3 to 7 team managers each. This email would have to consist of exactly where they went wrong for every single small mistake they made. It had to have a link where it was clear that it wasn't allowed or wrong, and what the right move in this case would be. It also had to be friendly rather than accusing. Making this email was one of the longer parts of our job, and for small mistakes, it would take 5 minutes, but for longer mistakes, it would take 15 minutes. If the person didn't include any information about themselves, we'd have to search it ourselves, adding another 5 minutes. After doing all of that, we had to report it in an Excel sheet so they could keep track of how many yes and how many no and for what reason. Corporate really pushed the "you are a guide, a trainer, a friendly person to show them how to do it" thing. They didn't want us to be a cop or the bad guy so that everyone hated us for saying no. I gave trainings on how to correctly fill in ticket forms and what to check before thinking about a ticket. Corporate also wanted us to do the job faster. They made basic templates for our mails that included the most common mistakes, so the only thing that we needed to do was to fill in the personal information and to slightly adjust it for the mistake. That wasn't fast enough for corporate though, so they made us add a disclaimer to our mails to not contact us but to contact their team manager if they didn't agree. No more DMs asking for help because that means we weren't doing our job. It still wasn't fast enough. Corporate didn't like that our ticket queue had tickets that were older than 3 days, and if it reached an age older than 3 days, we had to directly send it to the next department rather than checking it. We'd close it with maybe to say that we didn't check it. It rarely happened that tickets were older than 3 days, because usually we picked them up the same day or the day after. Only after the weekend it would be longer, because well, we didn't work on the weekend, so we had a backlog on Monday. It made us the fastest queue to put a ticket in, the other queues taking a week or 2 weeks before it's picked up. Corporate kept removing tasks till we had nothing remaining, all in the name of speed. We had to allow everything, but weren't allowed to tell everyone, so they would put effort in their tickets. We told corporate it was bad for 3 reasons. First of all, people weren't stupid. People would know and test their limits to see what they could get away with. Second, it would cause an overflow of appointments to our people going to visit houses to fix issue. Think like 1,500 appointments a day for 30 to 50 people. Third, it wouldn't speed anything up. Instead, we expect to become busier than ever because people would call and say it takes too long or their issue wasn't fixed. The people that went to the houses would have to call to say that it's for another department or say it wasn't what was said. 2, they need to reschedule to prepare. This would be an issue for every department because trashy tickets would be sent everywhere in the hope that someone would pick it up faster. Corporate said they've thought about it for a long time and it would be fine. They also did this for the department that handles requests for money. So we allowed, well, everything. Requests that weren't for someone to visit, have a person visit you anyway. You already have an appointment, have another one. They can have a tea party together. Anything goes, and the money department allowed thousands of euros to be given away. People would send requests for multiple smaller amounts to not stand out. Of course, this meant that exactly what we thought would happen, happened. People tested their limits, and we ended up with tickets that had 0 information. I have an issue, please send someone. The tickets were trash, and they were trash for every department. People started sending in more and more tickets, the same issue to every department, so every department had a huge backlog of trashy tickets. And the appointments? You were lucky if you'd get anyone in a month. This was at the start of COVID, so people called in sick. This didn't help the fact that everyone worked from home and we had more issues in general with that. The call queues went to 20 to 50 people to 500 people waiting. Everyone was overworked. Besides us, of course, our queue was empty. We had to fight for tickets to get our tickets per hour. We had fun chatting and listening to music. Corporate didn't allow anyone to contact us, so we had no consequences of what we did. Corporate came with some excuse that we had good months and lots of new people joined us, so the backlog was to set up everything for us. Not for existing issues, of course. Why would that be a problem? It all went so terrible, and corporate stuck their head in the sand during it. They didn't listen to complaints or our advice to fix it. By the time they finally undid the change, it was too late. The damage was done. They changed it because it helped. Our queue was empty, so they got what they wanted. Not because everything went terrible, of course. Now, because all the tickets were trash, we rejected everything. It took a lot longer because we had to write emails explaining all the issues they had, linking to everything that said how to fix it. And we had to figure out who we were dealing with because no one left their information on it anymore. So it took around an hour total for a single ticket. You can guess that meant we also got a backlog. We received more tickets in general because people were like, I'll just ask for someone to visit. That saves me having to do anything. So suddenly, it took multiple days for us to fix things, and that meant we got overworked as well. People slowly realized they had to put in effort for tickets again, but they forgot how to. We told them to go to their team managers for a refresher, of course. This would take them away from their job in order to train them again. People started quitting because of stress. I shortly left as well. I recently heard that it didn't get any better. The backlog is still there, and everything but the backlog is on pause. Projects to train people into the role or to get a higher role were paused, so no one joined. That's what happens when you don't listen to the people who know what they're doing. The company lost a lot of money and time because besides giving away money, they had to pay for the people to visit houses since it was an external company. I just don't get, they could see these metrics falling, right? The company was like, oh, things were better before. Why are we losing money? Why are people quitting? Why are things going wrong? Oh, something's got to be happening here. We've made a huge change recently. Could that be the catalyst? Nah, we're always right. It's never our fault. The people that are actually working in the day-to-day on the ground level, they don't know what they're doing. They are just wanting to get off free. They're freeloading. They just blah, blah, blah. You get the point, right? Because they just were not communicating, not understanding, not listening to the people in their day-to-day. This is what happened, and it looks like they still haven't learned from it. OP, good move on getting out of there because it looks like it's going to heck in a handbasket, going down fast. Nice job. Be nasty to English as a second language folks who inadvertently use violent language? Now you're stuck with Memo Cannon, Report Crusher, and Document Hunter, posted by the Black Company Wiki. I was a freelancer for a media company that maintains a database for their videos, photo galleries, other digital property, as well as a separate bit for contracts and the like. One of the clients who struck a deal with them to utilize their IP was represented by a woman with serious bullying issues. Let's call her Boomer. She was a Luddite and rarely seemed to understand anything that was being said on the conference calls. So, I suppose to feel important, she acted like the grammar police and would interrupt her own boss's business partners and stakeholders in mid-speech if they said something slightly differently than how she wanted to hear it. Sometimes she did this multiple times in a single call. The worst was when she abruptly corrected English as a second language folks, like the group from India or the project manager from Germany or the account rep from Hong Kong. Really, any stakeholders from any non-Anglophone country who were still learning English. But on top of the grammar policing, she had a special fixation on correcting violent words and phrases. Now I'll give you some examples to follow. Now this is something that I would support to a degree, as I do try to avoid that language myself when I have the presence of mind to do so. Now there have been some fair-minded movements for years now, all basically calling for a reduction in this type of language. But Boomer never conducted herself in a way that was respectful of anyone about this. So for me, it's not about the nobility of someone's cause, it's about how you treat people. When someone casually said, "Shoot me a note," very common to hear, Boomer would interject, "Wait, why did you just say that?" You could hear a pin drop. The proverbial tumbleweed would roll through. It's hard to convey the total rudeness in a Reddit post, but this is tangible stuff. She would then pontificate briefly on why such phrases were unacceptable, and it's a shame we've not moved beyond this language. And then suddenly, it was crickets again, like we're supposed to go back to the topic at hand. Like she didn't just treat someone like scum for saying a very common phrase. It's such a disruption, and she never apologized a single time. The first few times this happened, people were stunned. People from all countries of origin and all age groups, the other boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, and the younger folks. This also extended to hunting-related words, the phrase shooting fish in a barrel, and harmless phrases like deer in the headlights. When anyone said this stuff, she acted like she was being given carte blanche to be an entitled bully with anger issues for 45 seconds. Even the group I worked for, who got regular royalty checks from her boss, hated this. When she wasn't pulling these stunts, she was silent except for terse, distracted, soulless replies, and only when absolutely necessary. So to understate it politely, she earned only negative feelings from everyone. This came to a head. It turned out that the company was helping with a lot of her syndication and sub-licensing docs and even cloud management free of charge. Now, they did not have to do so, and it was not in the contract. This had been unofficially grandfathered for her by one of the senior sponsors, and only because Boomer was a Luddite. The operations guy who did some of this grunt work for her finally got insulted by one of Boomer's direct callouts. He said something like, "We need a dev who can hunt down the root cause." And she snapped as usual. So he categorically refused to do the work, meaning she would need to pay extra or get database access and do it herself like all the other clients. I saw a fun opportunity here and seized it. I volunteered to handle it for her myself until I could set her up with the necessary access, at which point she ultimately would use the same screens I use. She readily agreed, and this is where I think malicious compliance comes in. We made a customized interface for me to use and then gave her access to it. They were technically the same screens I use. There was a Brazilian IT guy who hated her more than anyone, and a girl in the creative department who commiserated with our cause. I sold them on my little plan, and one evening we made it happen. There was a duplicate web GUI, or GUI, graphic user interface, that had been created for testing or something, but was now disused. We decided to grant her access to this GUI, not the production or standard one, but with key verbiage and icons of violent language that we knew she'd hate, perforating the entire thing. The quick access bar that follows when she scrolls had these 6 beauties. Report Crusher. This was the reporting system she would be using 24 times per week. The icon was a vice with the paper getting smashed inside of it. If you look closely enough, the paper had the tiniest frown. Document Hunter. Instead of just search. The icon was a bullseye getting hit with an arrow. Shoot us a note. Instead of just contact us, the icon was a speeding bullet with an innocuous, chubby-cheeked smile and a baby-like expression. Memo Cannon. This was my favorite little contribution to the whole thing. It was always just a broken link. It never did anything except take you to a unique 404 message page with a teensy little line art drawing of a deer with antlers, his tongue sticking out, slack-jawed, and X's over his eyes. I just thought Memo Cannon was the funniest phrase I had come up with, and we knew it would stare at her in the middle of her screen for the next few years. The icon was a squat little cannon with a sparking fuse. Troubleshooting. Instead of just help, but the 2 OOs in troubleshooting were crosshairs. Wiki Change Patrol. This was worthless since it just linked to a recent changes page for a wiki full of deprecated docs that nobody consulted. But the icon was a gendarme-looking guy with a smacking huge baton into his palm. It also featured these gems. The cancel button for the reporting system said kill task instead of just cancel. We had a file deduping routine. We changed the text for that button to say, got time to kill? She didn't have any permissions to access this actual function, but she would be seeing this button each time she opened any document in the web viewer. There were a handful of spots where the IT guy put a splash of camouflage coloration. In the standard environment, these were all just dead spaces. He thought, I believe correctly, that camouflage would get her blood to boil. Before we granted her access to this wonderful Frankenstein, I permanently switched to the same environment in GUI so that I could say honestly, yes, these are the same screens that I use, which is what she agreed to. I hashed together a walkthrough in PDF that even a zombie could learn from using screen captures from the new interface, passed it along, and that was that. The fallout is a bit anticlimactic because I never got any calls from Boomer directly with feedback that I could savor myself. This is because she lured some gullible student to do the grunt work for her in an unpaid gig. So where I thought I'd be cherishing the apoplectic response firsthand, I actually wound up liaising with the disinterested teenager. But eventually, it did filter back to me secondhand that when Boomer finally saw the screen, she was livid. She called the account manager and demanded changes. The account manager and anyone else we knew was liable to get a call from her had been prepped beforehand for this eventuality and had access to screen captures, which backed up the idea that what she was seeing was the normal interface. Absolutely no changes whatsoever were made. See, I just love this little story here. It's so awesome because it's harmless, malicious compliance, but it's enough because it just gets to Karen here's inner core. It's stuff that she hates, but it's harmless stuff. And it's so fun to say. Like instead of saying this button here, you can say memo cannon, or excuse me, memo cannon. It sounds like a video game announcer. I just love this story so much. OP, this was genius. I love your terms. I love your absolutely awesome stuff. That sounds like Macho Man Randy Savage over here. Dr. Disrespect if you've ever seen that guy. Or if you go back to Ben Stiller in Heavyweights with Tony Perkis or White Goodman in Dodgeball, they all have this same kind of tough guy voice here, and that's just what I picture reading these things as. Memo cannon, document hunter. I'm having too much fun with this now. Good job, OP. You cannot access this website posted by Zanies for All. Once upon a time, there were no iPhones, no Wi-Fi. Social media was MySpace, and YouTube was pretty much just a shell of its current self. The internet had just hatched from its egg and needed time to grow into what it is today. But as a kid in the early 2000s, that wasn't helpful when you wanted to play games now and in school, because your parents wouldn't let you play them on a weekday and you didn't have a Game Boy. So there I was, bored to death in the 5th grade because I didn't like school much, and that meant on Monday I'd have to wait 5 days to eventually get back to playing Star Wars Battlefront, the better version, not the new trash, or Burnout 3. As there was in most elementary schools, we had a computer lab. It was big enough to host one classroom of 40 students and then some, and we had state-of-the-art Dell computers with Windows XP. For the most part, we were limited to a few educational PC games, Microsoft Office, and the internet, which was limited by the firewall to just the educational sites and Disney's Flash games. They did have the Oregon Trail, but I was too stupid at the time to play it more than 10% of the way through without losing my money or everyone dying. The computer lab was accessible before school between 7 and 8:30 a.m., during 2 breaks, breakfast for 20 minutes, lunch for 40 minutes, and after school. The only problem was there was nothing exciting to play. I'd try every game's website that I knew, but the result was always the same. Miniclip, you cannot access this website. Free online games, you cannot access this website. Newgrounds, you can't access this website either. Okay, fine. Nickelodeon, you can't access this website. I guess they don't like SpongeBob. One day, my older brother, the computer whiz, finds out about how to download Flash games from around the internet onto his local hard drive, which is as simple as taking the cookies from where they're stored onto your computer into an easily accessible location. Now we start building a repository of all our favorite games from the internet, but the only way we can play them for now is on the weekends and through the Flash player. No matter, we have a repository, except at the time I didn't really know what else to do with it. Honestly, I have my older brother to thank for a lot of this, since he was really into computers and the internet, because the next find was really important. Freewebs.com, the free website hosting site. There's only so much a 10-year-old can do with this, but I spent hours designing and playing with the website. I'd substitute game time with free website designing. It wasn't necessarily a video game, so my parents didn't mind me on it, and I found out that it wasn't a block website at school, so I'd just keep building websites in my free time. Once a website was finished, I'd build another, continuously improving and upgrading and designing with new combinations. It went on like that for about a week, and I'd have 5 free websites built in that time. And then I found out that you could upload Flash components on a page. Now imagine, you're 10 years old and you just found out that Pandora's box is standing right in front of you and you can do whatever you want to with it. What do? Keep it to yourself? Tell an adult about this newly discovered volatile power? Hide it and make sure nobody else can use it for evil? Close, but not quite. I embedded a healthy variety of Flash games on that page, from the really meaty ones like Drag Racer V3 and the Murloc RPG to some miscellaneous light ones. This was a trial run, after all. I just needed to know if it worked, and if it did, how far I could push it. I did my work and went to sleep a little early that night, because curiosity got the better of me more than staying up past my bedtime did. That next day, I walked into the computer lab right when it opened up, the only one to walk in, and went straight for the website to the page where I embedded the games. I remember being so anxious about whether or not it would work, and the uncertainty was nagging to me ever since the car ride to school. I just needed to know, would I be able to play those games? To put it simply, there wouldn't be a story if they didn't work. The games worked! Not all of them did, but they worked! Drag Racer V3 had a save function, so all I could really do was play arcade mode, which was fine with me, but just about everything else worked as I expected them to. The problem I did find was space on the website filled up quite quickly, and I told myself that night I would embed more games on the other sites I built. I'd focus only on games that I could play casually, not lengthy ones like Murloc, because if I couldn't save, then there was, really no point in playing them. By the time I left the computer lab that morning, there were 3 other kids. This trend would continue no matter when I went. I went home that night, fixing everything that I could. When I reached my perceived limit, about 20 small games on the main site, I would load more games to another site. Eventually, I would move to fixing each website so they were separated by categories like action, shooter, racing, and so on. But as far as I was concerned, it was a problem for future me. I'd go to sleep early again, be the first and only one in the computer lab, and be one of only a handful of kids that would stay there. That would go on for several weeks. One day, the computer lab was busier than usual, which was fine because that was 10 kids and I was guaranteed a computer I could sit down and play at. A group of maybe 3 of those kids saw me playing on my websites and, without asking for a link, just looking at the URL on my browser, they started playing. For now, it was just me and those 3 kids, and I really didn't think much of it. I went home that day just thinking about playing another game and switching up the website so I could navigate it easier. I went to sleep and got to the computer lab the next day, the first one there. A little while later, more kids started walking in. Day by day, there were more kids coming in. By the end of the week, it was half full. A week after that, no more than 10 computers were left vacant. Eventually, on the guest book, because FreeWebs had that to allow you to post comments on the site, I had commenters, everything from fans of the website saying hi to kids who wanted to play a certain game from a certain site. It became a thing where I would read the requests during the day, make note of what games I could actually add on what website, and then download them and replace them later that night. Months later, the websites I built packed that whole computer lab. I even remember a day when I walked in late and there were kids watching each other play when they couldn't get a computer themselves. I couldn't even find one to get on, but adolescent me felt a strange sense of accomplishment and pride, seeing so many people recognize the work that it took to build something that they could all enjoy. Unfortunately, over spring break, the school district also recognized my work and rewarded me with a firewall notification the Monday I returned. I was upset, but I'm looking back on it, and I realized that I followed the rules so well that it caught the adults' attention. It was interesting because I wouldn't talk to anyone outside of me playing my games on the computer, but I felt like the mastermind, sitting in plain sight, who was the reason everyone was here. I don't think anyone connected the dots that I was the reason the computer lab was probably packed. It's probably not a great malicious compliance, but it is a story that I think about from time to time. Oh, no, OP, this is one of my favorite malicious compliance stories I've read to date. Honestly, this is the one before it, because I grew up through the 90s and 2000s as this OP did, so I relate to this, playing all the games and going online, RuneScape, having AOL, You've Got Mail, and all that. This is such a funny, wholesome, humorous story that if you grew up, let me know in the comments how old you are, because if you understand what this OP went through to get these games online, to play them on computer, past the Oregon Trail, you'll know this is such a wholesome story. It's great, MC. He downloaded games he probably shouldn't have done illegally or whatever, but it's other than that harmless and a great story. OP, thank you so much for telling us this. I love it, man. Boss tries to give disciplinary action for working too hard, posted by Asian Clooney. Midway through my career, I found myself working for the most prominent private college in my state. I was in the IT department and was in charge of maintaining a few servers and all of the technology in the classrooms. Every summer, we would receive our budget for the year, and part of the budget that I managed was spent mostly on upgrading the audio-video presentation systems in the classrooms, and most of that work had to take place during the summer. This is fine normally, but our college administration had created a ticking time bomb for me a few years before. They had decided to spend about $100,000 on a few classrooms, but did not allocate any money in our budget to replace the equipment when it would eventually fail. I had been there for 5 years, and now that equipment was starting to fail. Increasing our budget was not an option, despite faculty growing to depend on the equipment in these spaces. I was left to figure out how to make the same budget replace all of the equipment in those spaces, as well as the normal set of classrooms that would need to be upgraded elsewhere. Fine, I was up for the challenge. I had to simplify and purchase more value brand of equipment and do extra work to cut corners. A couple of weeks of shipping delays for the majority of the equipment saw me with roughly 1 month to rip out, replace, rewire, and configure about 15 classrooms, as well as update and test all of the existing classrooms within about a month before the semester began. Realizing the amount of work ahead of me, I began working. I came in every day of the week for 28 days straight, working 8 to 10 hours to ensure that when that semester began, the professors would have working equipment. I was salary, so I didn't have to clock in. This gave me the freedom of schedule to work as little or as much as required. I worked myself sick and was literally sick at the end of the 28 days. My supervisor was a guy that we recently hired. Let's call him Gus. Near the beginning of the semester, while testing equipment, I realized that the audio driver in a common model of computer that we have in the classrooms was corrupted. Investigating it, I realized that the computer manufacturer had corrupted drivers on their web server where we downloaded it from. I asked my supervisor, who was in charge of managing the image deployment server, to rebuild the image with a non-corrupt version of the driver that I'd provided him, and he said that he would. I swing by the next day and I asked him if he had completed the rebuild. He had not. I tell him that I really need it as the semester loomed closer and closer, and he tells me he'll work on it. Next day, nothing. Day after that, nothing. Finally, he figures it out and I continue my work. He must have not liked being pressured, and perhaps the perception that he was incompetent, must have gotten to him. He decides to power trip and call me into his office and ask why I was working so much. I explained the administrative oversight a few years prior, shipping delays, cheaper equipment, extra required work, and his delaying of a working image. I tell him, hey look, I came in day after day after day asking for that rebuilt image. Each time that I said day, I am poking my finger straight down on the edge of his desk, enough that it makes a sound to emphasize that those delays hurt the work that I was doing. He wanted to find some personal failing that he could pull out of some disciplinary action around. I gave him none. Eventually, he ran out of ideas and I left his office, not thinking much of it. Gus, however, was a brown-noser of the highest order. He would follow our IT director like a puppy. He joined a band with my IT director, so my work situation was not exactly fair. The semester began and not a single issue in all of the classrooms was reported. I was proud of the work that I was able to complete given the challenges. The second day of the semester, my IT director calls me into his office. There, Gus is sitting beside him and they both want to talk to me. I don't like the looks of this. My IT director starts asking me about why I was working so much. I explained to him, as I did Gus, the various factors that made this summer's work extra challenging. This destroyed any valid criticism they could muster. Gus goes on to say that he innocently inquired about my work and that I became violent, talking about the gesture that I made on his desk, illustrating his failure to do his work in a timely manner. I demonstrate exactly what I did on the IT director's desk to show how ridiculous of a claim that it was. My IT director wanted to exert his authority, and they would not stop until they had something to discipline me with. Nothing I would say would change the result. I was to be in trouble for whatever transgression they imagined up in this meeting. I make sure to point out how long it took Gus to do the small task that I depended on, knowing that I could have completed it in about an hour. He was incompetent. My IT director then alludes to the fact that I should respect Gus more as he is my supervisor. Screw it, I think to myself. I then tell my director, it is as if Justin Bieber was trying to teach you about music theory. It's only going to tick you off. This sudden, sharp, and, in my opinion, hilarious comparison was too funny. Both Gus and my IT director immediately laughed their butts off, even though Gus was the subject of this insult. Once they had stopped laughing, my IT director put on a more serious tone. He says that I could manage my time better despite the unique circumstances of this summer's work. His voice gets really soft and slow while he's talking to me now. This is a trick he forgot that he told me that he uses in arguments to make the other person seem like they're out of control. It is condescending, as if spoken to as a child, and now he is using it on me. He tells me that he wants me to take some time management class. Also, to take a couple of days off and think about it. I just want you to think about it. However, he is going to need my keys and badge. Cue malicious compliance. At this point, he has provided me enough evidence that this is not a job that I want to stay at. The absurdity of working so hard and for 28 days straight on salary with no extra pay and to be rewarded with a disciplinary action was too much. That, in that moment, I had thought about it. Without saying anything, I hand over my badge. I took all of the mini keys off of my keyring and set them on his desk. I have thought about it," I tell him in the exact soft and condescending tone he used with me. "And you can keep the keys and the badge," I told him with the biggest wry smile on my face. I then walk to my office. He follows me, and I notice his eyes had become glassy, as if he was hurt by the situation unfolding before him. He expected me to capitulate and accept his punishment for a job well done. He kept saying, "I just want you to think about," with each time becoming increasingly desperate. And I kept repeating, "I have thought about it." He disappears back into his office with his little minion, Gus, to discuss damage control. I quickly pen an email to all my other coworkers letting them know that I was leaving and that I enjoyed working with them. I had to work quick as I knew they would shut down all of my accounts very quickly. I packed up my personal effects and left. Gus and my IT director offered to help me, trying to walk back the situation with some small gesture of goodwill, but I was gone. I had been there for 5 years, but I was willing to walk away the moment that he tried to treat me so poorly. I found out a little later that the week before I left, a programmer that we hired had left after he treated her poorly too. I was not aware of the reason that she left when she did, but our office manager shared that she quit abruptly like me without anything lined up given his behavior. About a year later, I hear from the office manager that the IT director had left. Rumor is he was primarily working for another company while in his office at the college, effectively double dipping or making money for 2 jobs while only doing 1. He had been caught doing so and was warned by the administration to stop. He opted to leave instead of owning up to his own dubious behavior. My only regret is that I didn't leave that job sooner. An update. Many comments have mentioned that I did this to myself and I gave them free work, or that I should have not worked myself so hard. I chose to. That was never the issue. That my director discounted the challenges I faced and insisted that it was personal failing was beyond me. I never complained to my director or supervisor about the situation until they tried to discipline me and I had to unpack the circumstances for them. When I started the job, several rooms and event spaces were non-functional and had fallen into disrepair. Issues existed across all of the classrooms. I worked there for 1.5 years to fix all of these issues and return them to working order. Once I had implemented more permanent fixes and solutions, we went from 4 to 5 reported issues a day to a few every couple of weeks. I eventually implemented turnkey automated systems that made my job very easy. At this point, I started assisting Gus in the help desk, and he was the help desk manager. I worked with him and another support coworker to push down the help desk tickets. No one asked me to do this, and I worked very well with them. I helped Gus with issues that he could not fix, and he was appreciative. This was not required of me, but I helped because I had locked down and automated all of my systems. But Gus was lazy, took smoke breaks all day, and made student workers who knew very little, but more than him, try to fix the issues. I did not have a problem with him until I had to depend on him. Years of doing this work had shown me that addressing the issues while campus was empty took a lot less total time, as I had to schedule my work around classes and so on. Though it was stressful, fielding all of the complaints and getting additional pressure from my director if classrooms were not working would be worse, stress-wise. Once the semester began, I was fine. Had I remained, I would have taken time off and coasted through the semester like previous summers. All of that extra work would have been balanced by a lot of days where I took a more relaxed pace and worked no extra hours for months. Some comments mention that I should have used this as a feedback mechanism to management. That is a private sector mentality. Academia works through grants and endowments. Just as I had entered the college to find whole rooms offline, the administration would have let those rooms break down and let the faculty deal with it. I worked so hard because I cared about the work that I did, the faculty I supported, and how that reflected on me. One last thing, when I started working there, I tried a more communicative relationship with my director. Eventually, they got annoyed and left me with no direction. I had to determine my own projects and schedule unless something came down from administration that required our department. Directors in colleges are more focused on high visibility projects and padding their resumes. Attention is paid only when problems arise. Oh, OP, this is a ton to take in because you work so hard to get this working because you care about the students, you care about the faculty. You don't want them to have equipment that doesn't work, that impedes their learning process, that makes it harder on the teachers. You want this to be a good learning experience for the kids, and that is awesome that you want to do that. And it is a lot of work that you did. That is so much, and ideally, in a perfect world, without Karens in academia like this, they would recognize that. They would say, OP, you worked for 28 straight days, 8 to 10 hours. Thank you so much. Here is an award. Here is a bonus, a raise, something to show that we are appreciative of your work. And you know what? Even on top of that, they should have said, hey man, you've been working so hard. You need a break. You need to rest. Please, if they're concerned about your health at all, which they're not. And then Gus, brown nose and going up to the IT director, getting close, being in the band that they're playing in. He just goes from a troublemaker in the past to a super troublemaker in the present. And then OP stands his ground and says, I quit after all of this bullcrap and gaslighting by the director. You know what, OP? You found out that the other person quit too. You didn't actually put up with any of that gaslighting crap, and you came out ahead on top, I bet you, getting out of this place that did not care for you or respect your time, worth, and value. Way to go, OP, on standing up for yourself and what's right. I got back at them big time, posted by St. Harrop. I worked for 2 years at a tile store. I handled customers as well as worked in the warehouse. Not to brag, but for those 2 years, I worked the earliest shift that no one wanted, because you had to receive the daily truck and put the tile orders away by hand at 6 in the morning. But I also said that I would work every Saturday as well. Now, I didn't do this because I hated myself and wanted to suffer. It was because I wanted the outside sales job. The outside salesman that got the job entered right after I started, and we hit it off quickly. We will call him Joe. Joe confided in me that he had no plans to continue this job after about a year or so. So from the get-go, I said I wanted that job, and I worked my butt off to get it. Pulling shifts no one wanted, doing jobs no one would do, and doing things that were definitely not part of my job description. This included doing a lot of the outside sales job. I would take over when Joe would call out or just needed help. He came to rely on me and gave me part of his job. I saw this as a type of internship and thought it would pay off. Fast forward 2 years. Joe tells me that he is about to put his 2 weeks in and to get my resume together. He puts in his 2 weeks notice and I immediately put my application in. I got the backing from both Joe and the branch manager to get the job and did a pretty good job on the interview. I knew that I was pretty much a shoo-in for the job. I had seniority and it never caused a problem in my time there. I had a very good relationship with the contractors that I sold to, and I knew all of them by name. The main part of the outside sales job was working with the contractors, so I felt confident, to say the least, that I had what the company was looking for. 2 other employees applied as well. An ex-convict who had anger problems that will come up later. We'll call him Bob, and a recently hired woman who had no experience in tile. We'll call her Ann. The only other job she had ever done was as a secretary, and she was currently just helping customers with selections. Both of them were older than me. I was in my early 20s and both of them in the 30s. A couple of days after that, I got a call from HR telling me I didn't get the job. Instead, they wanted to give it to Ann. I won't lie, I thought I misheard or that it was a prank at first. The only reason HR would give me as to why they passed me up for the position was, you're just too good of a worker and valuable at your position for us to lose you. You do such a good job and are so responsible. We would hate to lose that. So, because I'm good at my job, you won't hire me for another one with more responsibilities? Yep, but to show how much we appreciate you, we are giving you a $1 raise. Do I still get my yearly dollar raise on top of this in a couple months? Well, no. Think of this as we are giving it to you 2 months early. I was fuming for a couple of days. Their excuse didn't make sense, and I had a feeling that I was being discriminated against due to my age. However, I was set upon making a point that they chose the wrong person that came up with a plan. Because I was so good at my job, I didn't get the outside sales job. So if I was bad at my job, maybe they would promote me then. Let me rephrase. I wasn't bad at my job, but I told my manager that I no longer would work the morning shift, would no longer be there on Saturdays, would no longer do the worst jobs, and would no longer be doing any jobs that fell outside of my description, including the outside sales job that I had been helping with. And goes out for a couple of weeks for training and personal time, during which things are already starting to fall apart. My manager asked me to fill in for Anne just while she's away. He understands why I'm doing what I am, but asked as a personal favor. I agree, and things begin to get back to where they were before. Anne comes back, and I resume my firm stand. Anytime something was supposed to be done by the outside sales position that I normally did, I would send it her way. Customers, problems, heavy to lift things, and other favors that I used to do for Joe, I refused to do for her. It gave me a little relief to see her running everywhere trying to get everything done. She only asked me once to help her, to which I just told her that it wasn't my job. Those first couple of weeks, things were a little rough as most of the jobs were left over from when Joe and I were running things. So most of the problems came from the daily grind. But the weeks that followed were chaotic to say the least. Items came in late, jobs were missing or unordered, contractors didn't understand where their materials were. Mind you, these guys get paid per job. So every day their material isn't there is another day they don't work or get paid. So when their materials don't come in, their workers who are paid hourly are getting paid for no reason at all. My favorite one is when she accidentally sent an order across the country, costing the company thousands as we lost money on that job. As things were starting to turn into the dumpster fire I knew it would, HR called me in to talk about my attitude. We have heard your attitude as of late. It doesn't sound like you are being a team player. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Have I said something hurtful to someone? No. Maybe did I hurt somebody's feelings unintentionally? No. Oh, okay, so I just don't understand what attitude you're talking about then. We have received word that you aren't being as helpful as you were to Joe as you are now to Anne. Well, you see, I am far too valuable at my current job. I can't possibly detract away from that. They immediately saw that they had made a mistake in giving me that reason as to why they didn't hire me. They then told me that I needed to be more of a team player and would pay me an additional $1 an hour when the yearly raise came around in 2 months. I told them that it wasn't my job to do what they were asking, and if they wanted me to do that they would have to negotiate my contract. They told me that they would need to discuss it and to reconsider being a team player. I did not relent, and they weren't interested in renegotiating my contract. Well, 2 months after Anne got the job and things went to heck, she stepped down. Again, I put my resume in, as did Bob. Now, remember how I said that he had a slight anger issue? Well, that came to a head just before Anne put her 2-week notice in. Bob threatened a contractor. The contractor was a real piece of work, but that doesn't excuse the fact that Bob threatened the guy. Regardless, with this now happening and Anne putting in her 2 weeks, I couldn't see how they couldn't hire me. It was me or someone who threatened customers. I once again go through the process, but this time I play my cards close to my chest. They didn't know that after Ann was first chosen over me, I started to look for a new job. Just as this interview process was going on, a company called me back and offered me an outside sales job at their company. It was lower pay than my current company's, but they didn't need to know that. They also did not need to know that I accepted the position and told them I needed to finish my 2 weeks. I wasn't going to give them my 2 weeks though. I was going to make it look like it was a competition and try to string it for those 2 weeks. The company offered me the outside sales job and nearly begged me to take it. They apologized for making the bad decision of picking Ann over me and told me that they would love to have me in the position. Now, let the fun begin. I promptly told them that I would need to think about this as their competitor had just offered me that same job for a higher pay. The look on their faces was to die for. I pretended that it was a back and forth for 2 weeks, which conveniently went over Ann's quitting date and my new job's starting date. They got anxious because they now didn't have anyone for the job and finally gave me a final offer. I promptly shot them down and told them that I didn't want to work for a company that treats their hardworking employees like crap. They can sleep in the bed they've made. And then I told them that I was starting the next day at the other company. I have never been so happy. This is actually, OP, a huge lesson because you hear about places that say, oh, we're not going to promote you because you do so dang good at your job. It makes the company sense in their mind. They're like, oh, this person is so good at this position. If they leave, we're going to have somebody that's not so good taking their place, despite the fact that OP would have been the shining star for this other outside sales job. I mean, seriously, I'm sorry that OP learned the hard way, which really sucks. But the thing that OP did do was keep the cards to the chest, as he said, and just know the way to handle this, what to say, what to do, and then execute properly 2 times. 2 times on this, for the first application and the second application. Because I would be fuming too if I just worked my butt off and tried to do all this extra stuff to get up there and they just take advantage of it. They took advantage of you doing all this extra non-job description stuff and just said, oh, he's doing it for free. It seems fine. We're just going to string him on along, just till he decides to not do it anymore. But free labor, right? No. OP, good job standing up for what you believe in and yourself and nailing it. And I hope your new job is a whole heck of a lot better than this one. But by the sounds of it, that's not a hard thing to be. Good job, OP. Check out my next Malicious Compliance compilation to continue your listening session by clicking here on your screen. Thank you so much for checking this one out and see you in the next one.